Welcome, everybody, to the Houston Smite podcast, the only podcast, or the only thing Smite related, where there is still an equal distribution of NA and EU people. My name is the Robbie Dog. I'm joined today by Sabo, my NA compadre, and we are here to talk about Super Regionals, which happened last weekend, and, well, last week as well, because it started on Wednesday, so, yeah. And obviously, if you are following our podcast a bit, you notice that we didn't do anything in 2 weeks, and that is just kind of because we didn't have the motivation to.
Nothing happened, so there's like...
Yeah, well, we usually do previews before actual events, right?
Who wants to talk about week and burrito?
Hey, I did last episode we did.
The only thing that happened in these last 2 weeks is Burrito dropped the roster and are looking for an entirely new roster going into next season, the Challenger circuit. So
you know, you're making a good point here because I actually forgot about that. So apparently I really don't care. Anyway, the thing I do care about, though, is what happened at Super Regionals, because it was actually a really exciting event to watch. We had a ton of great storylines, and, well, we're going to try and present some of those to you now, our audience. And let's start with probably the first and the biggest one, right? Or would you like to do it any differently?
I mean, the biggest one, I mean, it pretty much covers it, right? I mean, the biggest storyline of the weekend was Team Dignitas' collapse. And, you know, normally, I don't think we would have started out with a team that failed to make Worlds, but going into the event when you're considered the best team in the league and the best team in the world from this weekend with only one win, and that's throughout the entire weekend, that's a huge story.
Yeah, like it was definitely a very, very big surprise, right? I think some people were expecting the matchup between them and Rival to be close and for Rival to potentially win it. Obviously not in the fashion that Rival ended up winning it, but I don't think anyone is expecting that, even in the case that Rival won the matchup between them and Dig, that Dig wouldn't make it through the Wildcards bracket. And they didn't even make it through, it wasn't even close. They weren't even close to making it through. They only got one win in the entire bracket.
And I think, looking back at that set with Rival, I think if they had at least won game 2, it would have went to 5, but with Rival winning it 5, and they'd still go into that wild card round with a little bit of confidence that they can actually still do it, but they got swept. And so, you know, coming out of that Rival set, their confidence was shattered, and it really showed through in the team play. Cubo, Fred, and Variety were just disjointed all weekend long because of that one set, and then really that one game in game 2 against Rival, where, you know, Dignitas had 5 Fire Giants and all 3 Phoenixes down, and still were not able to pull it out. Rival held on and won it.
Yeah, there's almost no way you should really lose a game where you have that many Fire Giants, where you're given that many Fire Giants by the enemy team, right? They were really just conceding at them in a lot of cases because they didn't have the chance to sort of fight on even ground because of Dig still being a bit ahead. And then the more drastic thing that I'd say is you're never supposed to lose a game if you have all 3 Phoenixes down on the enemy team. And that's what they also did, right? They had broken the base completely, and they lost that game, which is insane to think about.
And it kind of reminded me back at DreamHack with the game 2 between Trifecta and Energy. Trifecta had such a big lead in that, and it's the same situation here. Trifecta had such a big lead on energy, but the game got later and later, and they weren't able to close it out. And after a certain point, we know that even in Pro League games, that it reaches a point where everything's even. And Fire Giant is really only there for regen because, yes, it gives you a little bit of power boost, but you have so much power, ego doesn't matter. It's basically, can I hit 3 autos to kill my opponent, or do I hit 4 autos to kill my opponent? That's all the Fire Giant means. And if you're missing abilities or you have a bad initiation, or something doesn't go right, it's over, and you can be controlling the entire game and winning the entire game, and just one team fight, and you lose that one team fight late enough, it's over, and that's what happened.
Yeah, and I think there are ways you can force your way into the Titan room, right? And they didn't seem to play as a unit in the entire set, really. In game 2, well, it was obviously the best game that they had in the set, probably also the best game in the entire weekend, I'd even say. But still, they looked disjointed, as you said earlier, and I think the big person you can notice with that is variety. And a lot of the reason why they were in that game from earlier on was because Zeros was going off, right? He was hitting very strong Fawfuls in the sort of mid-game portion of that match. But towards the late game, he kept missing, and that big advantage they had in the mid-game where he was just ripping through with those Fawfuls just sort of disappeared going into the late game. And if that is the case, you're going to lose team fights, and if you lose team fights, then you are going to lose the game, because as you said, Fire Giant's not doing enough that much late game. The only thing it's really doing still, where it has a very significant effect, is in terms of structure damage. But then again, you're already dealing massive amount of structure damage anyway, because your Hunter's full build, and he probably has Titan's Bane online and all that other fancy stuff that they tend to build nowadays. And if that is the case, then yeah, the Fire Giant's not going to do much, and it didn't, and it alone is not going to carry you. You still need to hit your stuff, which Dig just didn't do in the late game.
Yeah, and another factor was the they sort of, you were talking about the 12th ults and zeros, how they really controlled that mid game with the 12th ults. Well, their focus seemed to be Ice Baby on the Kabrakan jungle, and the later it got, and he was huge around the defenses of the Phoenixes when they were still up. He was having good initiations, walling off Arkle, time and time again during these sieges with Fire Giant on these Phoenix. Arkle was taken out of the fight, and that was mainly on Ice Baby's initiations. And if you're losing your Hunter late game during Phoenix sieges, you don't have that kind of the damage necessary to take down these buffed Phoenixes that are now up to 3k health instead of the 2k health that they used to be, and that drags the game out.
Yeah, especially if you're not running an assassin in the jungle, right? Because if an assassin's building into damage as well, he can sort of act as a substitute for the structure damage that your Hunter does, right? He's going to probably be dealing a smaller amount of damage still, but a comparable amount, just a lot less safely. But if you can still force your way into the Phoenix room and force the enemies back into their own Titan room, an assassin can still take down Phoenixes pretty quickly. They had a warrior jungle in that set as well, so, and obviously it's something that most people are running, were running during the super regionals. I'm sure we'll get to talk about that later, where tanky junglers, and Dig didn't really have the Hunter mid to make up for that, which we also saw later on in the tournament. and due to that, they just weren't able to really take down Phoenixes anymore after Arkle had died. And obviously, because hunters are a big threat to tanks late games, right? With the amount of sustained damage they can dish out, with the amount of pen that they build into, with the Executioner Titansbane combo that we saw, I think, during most of the weekend. The free tanks on the side of Rival become a real issue once Arkle's down, because how are you going to take them down yourself while Rival is still going to have their hunter votes and he is still going to be hitting your tanks and taking them down?
Yeah, without your hunter in those Phoenix Sieges, when you don't have an assassin, it drags out the game. And as we talked about just a second ago, the longer the game goes, gold, all that stuff, that doesn't matter. Fire Giants, we've already said, only they're really gen after you finish the sieges, where you can just fall back into the jungle a little bit and regen. But, even that doesn't help very much late game. So, Rival did a good job at just extending the game, and I like the fact that Ice Baby was down to Cubal Fred, I think 3 or 4 levels during the middle of the game, and he was able to come back and still have an impact later on in that game too. And then in game 3, the closeout, 6-1 on Athena. So he had a big impact for him, especially in this set.
Yeah, I think game 2 might have been the worst game he had during the entire weekend, right? And he still finished 3-3, which is still good. And obviously, the big thing he did was that his ults late game, as you already said, really changed the team fights. And I think there was one ult in particular that really won them the game in the end, if I remember correctly. But I think the last team fight they lost, Dig, and which obviously ended up with Rival then ending the game off of it, was initiated by Ice having a great Cabrakan ult. So that sort of made up for his poor performance during game 2, I think. At least to a certain degree.
But the game 2 loss, in my opinion, broke Dignitas' confidence for the weekend.
Yeah, I think it at least hurt them massively, right? I think in all days, and we'll talk about the later days a bit later on. In all days, they had sort of a set or a particular game where they just got demotivated massively. And during the first day, it obviously was the second one, right? The first one was a weird game where they sort of just got decided at 23 minutes, and then Rival just sort of ended off of that without really any way that anyone saw it coming, right? And the third game then was really a pretty big stomp by Rival as well. The second one was very close, and Dig did look good, but afterwards they never found their footing as much again, and even on the later days, I think they would have had a chance to come back, but there were other things that really killed their motivation, especially on day 2.
I'm sticking by my saying that it broke the confidence of Dignitas. And when you come in, that was on a Thursday. You go to bed, you try to put it out of your mind. You get up Friday, you're ready for a wildcard round. And, well, your first game is against Energy, and they had already had a warm-up game against Noble, and were really pushing it, and really looked like the old Energy. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but the thing that the casters alluded to that was really problematic for Dig was Energy's vocal celebrations and taunts, and it kind of threw Dignitas off their game, and saw other teams start to imply that against Dignitas. And with the yelling and the taunting and the celebrating loudly. And I stand by the fact that that game 2 loss got into the heads of Dignitas and really hurt them later in the week, because they won one game, and that was against Noble. And I believe at one point in that match, Noble was up 12K.
Yeah.
So it was a bad weekend for what many people considered to be the best team in the world coming into this thing.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, right? I was thinking that energy, or I think that energy, the way that they won the game against Dig, also in very dominant fashion, really just tilted them even more than the rival loss had already done. Right, you can still recover from being tilted if you have a good night's sleep over it, but then you go into day 2 really feeling the pressure, because you are considered to be one of the best teams in the world, and you should make it through this wildcards bracket, and there are no excuses if you don't, right? And then you show up to your first game, you just get demolished by an amazing looking energy, and that just takes the winds out of your sails even more. And I think that's what we really saw for the rest of day 2. And yeah, obviously the set between energy, I'm not sure what else there's to say about it without going too much already into the topic of energy itself. So another big thing that happened obviously in the course of Dig sort of losing their way was that NA actually won a set against EU again for the first time. Like
They
since
I believe they won 2 because Dignitas lost both Space
yeah,
Station and Trifecta.
yeah. I just
But if you had trying to remain unbiased here, but if you ask me, that was more of Dignitas's weekend. That was normally I would expect Dignitas to beat Trifecta and to beat Space Station, if not easily, with a decent performance. Like,
yeah.
it wouldn't exactly be a stomp, but it wouldn't exactly be close either. But with Rival, like I said, Rival breaking their confidence in game 2, and then their first game Saturday, energy gets inside their head. That just spelled doom for Dignitas. And Space Station and Trifecta were able to take advantage of it. And if Noble had better late game team fights, they would have beat them too. But that to me was just Dignitas collapsing.
Yeah, I definitely see it that way as well, right? On a normal weekend. Like if we ran super regionals like this 10 times, I think Dig makes it through these wildcard brackets 9 out of 10 times. Just because they have the quality to do that, and they're not always going to get this demotivated.
I would say 8 out of 10, because you have to give Elevate credit for their composition. But I would agree with you. A majority of time, if we ran this 10 times, they would come out, and that just didn't happen. They just completely collapsed this weekend.
Yeah, and it was sad to see, honestly. And yeah, you have to give Elevate a lot of credit, and I think if they don't make it through, right, the 9th time where they don't make it through as well, one out of those 2 times, they at least get 3rd place in the wildcard bracket. And yeah, it was sad to see, because obviously it needs to be pointed out now, we're not going to see this Dig at Worlds. We're not going to see any Dig at Worlds. And it would have been a great team to see there if they had managed to actually put up a decent performance there as well, right?
Well, we may not see this Tig again because Tig's not worried about Worlds anymore. They're going into Season 5. That's that time of year where roster changes can happen, and somebody can get kicked, somebody can do whatever. So we may not see this exact composition from Dignitas again.
Yeah. That would also be just a sad thing to see, right? Because it's not like this team has a sort of systemic issue on LAN. It's just they didn't show up for one of the 4 LANs or 3 LANs they were in this year.
They didn't show up for the biggest LAN.
Yeah, their biggest LAN, obviously, because they're not going to Worlds.
Well, I still say Super Regionals is the biggest LAN. Even bigger than Worlds. I mean, not like as in far as crowd size, because that Super Regionals is held at Hi-Res Studios. It's mainly only the employees, administrators, and the players. But as far as importance goes, I think Super Regionals is just a little bit more important than Worlds, because you got to make it to Worlds before you actually win Worlds.
Yeah, I guess. I think the Worlds title is obviously more important than the regional title, and that's really the what takes away from Super Regionals being really important, is that we don't see the top teams of both regions facing each other, right? Because there's just an EU final and an NA final, and not a Super Regionals cross-regional final. Wouldn't make any sense. The name wouldn't make any sense then.
That's Worlds.
Yeah, that's gonna be Worlds probably.
The Super Regional cross-regional finals is at Worlds.
See, I still question whether it will be cross-regional. Because,
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah, we have some time left until Worlds. So, anyway, I think Worlds is more important. That was just all I was going to say. Just because the title's more important. And yeah, in terms of level of performance...
I'm going to use an analogy real quick. Are you familiar with the NFL and the playoffs and the Super Bowl?
I know that NFL is hockey and Super Bowl is football. American football.
No, the NHL is hockey. The NFL is National Football League.
Oh, did you say NFL?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, I know that's football as well. I misunderstood.
They're split up into 2 conferences, and right before the Super Bowl, you got to decide the conference champions. And it takes place a couple weekends before the Super Bowl, and more often than not, the conference championships are more more entertaining and more important than the actual Super Bowl. So there's that.
Oh, that's interesting, because like as an outsider, right? The only like circumstances I ever hear anything about American football is when the Super Bowl's on.
Well, the Super Bowl determines a league championship.
Yeah,
but the conference conference championship games are usually more entertaining.
Yeah, I could see that being the case, right? In looking at our football, right? Football in Europe, we have a similar thing sort of whenever there is a World Cup, because in the finals of the World Cup, everyone just tends to play very carefully, because you don't want to lose, because it's the final. If you lose, you're not the champion. And in a lot of cases, the semifinals then are usually more interesting than the actual finals themselves. Or the third place matchup can be very interesting as well, because there's not as high stakes, right?
You understand what I'm saying, though?
Yeah, I think I do.
Super regionals can be more entertaining than Worlds at points. At point in times, like.
And I think if you look at just the average level of performance, obviously because Super Regionals only contains the NA and EU teams, the average level of performance is a bit higher than what you will see at Worlds, right? We only have Well, I say only, but it's 60% of the teams at Worlds that are from NA and EU. So
from the FPL, yeah.
yeah. Point being
And
still.
one of those things is,
Point being still that overall level of performance is a bit higher. But yeah. And where were we? I don't remember.
well, I think we've pretty much summed up Dignitas this weekend. Unless there's anything else you want to say about Cubo, Fred, Variety, and the boys.
Yeah, Cuba looked really bad. I think he had the lowest KDA out of any jungler at Super Regionals, actually. And it makes sense, right?
I really think that was the just the fact that he and Variety didn't look like they were on the same page at any point this weekend.
Yeah, the entire team really didn't, but those two especially. It was sad to see, man. I would have loved to see they get Worlds, but we're not going to.
And we get Cherio at Worlds.
Yeah. Like everything's a trade-off, you know. So, speaking of Cherio, is it the next topic on the list? Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Nice transition there, Sabo. You were setting that one up for me, weren't you?
I've been trying to set you up for 4 minutes now. So. Oh yeah.
Elevate.
Let's move on to Elevate.
Yeah. They had a good tournament. Well, a pretty decent one. Obviously, they lost their semi-final against Obey in very close fashion, right?
Closer than anybody would have thought.
Yeah, and then they made it through the Wildcards bracket pretty much flawlessly, only dropping a game to the revitalized energy that we're going to talk about a bit later on as well, I'm sure. And yeah, it was really impressive, their matches against Obey already, right? They brought out this triple Guardian, double Hunter comp in, I think, 3 of the 5 matches that they played against them. And I think it led them to 2 victories. They won one more game with a different comp, I think.
Yeah, they ran in game 1, 2, and they lost game 2 with it. They ran a different comp in game 3 and won with it. And then ran a very similar comp in game 4 that they did in 3 and lost with it. And then in game 5 went back, or no.
Let me think about this. So they ran
the
double Guardian plus Nox support in game 3. And they won with it.
The Nox Rama is what won them game 3. And then they lost 4 and 5 with different composition.
Yeah.
So, but this is a difficult topic to talk about because as a spectator, as somebody just watching the games, you're like, how do you not know how to beat this comp? It was the same comp that Valence was running in spring, where it was 3 Guardians and 200. And oh, by the way, Cherio was on that Valence squad team. So it's like you figured out how to beat this comp 6 months ago, and you can't figure out how to beat it now. Like what?
So explain to me, how do you beat this comp? In that case.
Well, I'm going to the trifecta set or the trifecta game in that last game of the weekend of the wild card round. I thought the picks and bans really well done by trifecta, and that they had the comp to really counter it. I think where they hurt themselves is they took fights too early, but the Hoagie, Odin, Zeus with the Jing Tian and the Kumbhakarna that trifecta ran, I think was a good counter to the Triple Guardians because there's a lot of CC, a lot of flat damage with just Zeus and Hoagie together. I thought that it was a good comp where I saw it failing is they took fights too early. And what we mean about that is they tried to gank the RDO, the 4-on-1 RDO in solo lane. Numbers was right. No numbers was right. They didn't have vision, so they didn't know the other 3 members of Elevate were there. But they had a good job of trapping RDO in the cage where she couldn't heal, and then the Zeus ult on top of that, right on top of the cage. But at the time, the mid laner slips my mind. What's his name?
Herwin.
Herwin had only just finished off the stacking item. God, I'm drawing a blank again.
Warlock Sash.
The Warlock Sash. Yeah, he had just finished off the Warlock Sash. He didn't have too many stacks on it. That item doesn't become cost efficient until about 30 or 40 stacks, and he had only had barely like 10 or 11 when they tried to gank him, so there just wasn't enough damage to kill the RDO. And when the cage came down and the rest of the team, rest of Elevate was there to back him up, we saw they 4-for-nothing wipe, and it really went downhill from there. So
yeah,
I would have liked to see that attempted maybe on the next rotation of spawns of speed and blue buff spawns. I'd have liked to seen it a little bit later when he had finished stacking and maybe had pin boots and maybe had started towards the obsidian shard. But at the time when they took that fight, he just didn't have the damage, and when that cage came down and no numbers got that huge massive heal off of hitting 3 people with his one,
yeah,
and turned that fight, and there was just nothing to do from there on. And when I said they took fight too early, that's what I mean. If they wait just a little bit longer, where Herwin has the damage to finish off no numbers, I think we see a closer game in the final wildcard game than what it turned out to be.
Yeah, I remember that moment actually, because I think we were both really fucking surprised by how much she actually healed.
Because no numbers hit multiple people with that one, and it scales off the number of people you hit.
Yeah. So. He healed from like 10% HP up all the way to 90% HP. And then, like, the crazy thing is that he was so good. That he was so good, because then he stayed in the fight until he was again at 10% HP. Then the fight was done.
Yeah, but again, the point was I'm trying to make is Trifecta had the comp to really counter and win that against that Elevate 3 Guardian 200 composition. They just took fights a little bit too early, and when Elevate was able to recover and get back into those fights, they snowballed after that. And so it was.
See,
I think by the end of the weekend, by the end of the wild card weekend, teams had figured out how to stop it, but there was just because Energy was the only team in the wild card round that had beaten the comp, and it was a very similar comp to what. Well, maybe not the Kumbhakarna or the Old Jungle, but it was fairly similar composition that Energy beat them with in this. So it was just bad timing by Trifecta. I would love to see them wait, because I think if they waited there and waited for Herwin to just have just a tiny bit more damage, then that's a fight that goes in Trifecta's favor.
See, I don't think that's necessarily countering the comp, because it's pretty much the same comp, right? Sure, you have a Hunter mid and Zeus, but Zeus is pure damage, just like most Hunters are. And did I say you have a Hunter mid and Zeus? I meant you don't have a Hunter mid and Zeus. You have a Mage mid. And you have a Warrior jungle instead of the Guardian jungle, but it's still this triple tank comp, and you're still relying on having those two massive backliners, which in the case of Elevate obviously were the two hunters, and in the case of Trifecta were the Zeus and the hunter. But still, like they're fully damage focused, those backliners, and then you pair them up with the three massive tanks that you put in front, and basically you hope you can kill their tanks before they kill yours. And I don't think that counts as countering the comp, because it's just the damage type sort of shifted. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm following you.
And yeah, I'm not sure that I would necessarily count that because of that. And yeah, I think a lot of it was down as well. They obviously tried to force Death Panther onto a mid hunter he wasn't comfortable with, right? By banning away the AMC in the first phase and then drafting the Hui.
Oh, yeah.
First picking Hui, and yeah, and I don't think it ended up working out, right? Because we saw it on her against from Death Panther against Energy already, I think, where it didn't work out. But in this game it did, and that was the main difference that I saw between this match and between the Energy set, was that on her mid really worked out for Death Panther here. Because even if they get that lead on the solo side, right, that massive teamfight wipe, I think you're still in that game and you can still recover, and if your comp is built to counter the enemy comp, you can still do that. I don't think it was. I think it's just that in the game we saw from Elevate against Energy, you had Death Panther not going off, and you had Cherio having probably his worst performance of the weekend. And when they didn't have that against Trifecta, it didn't really look like Trifecta had much of a chance in that game.
Well, if it hadn't have been a 4-0 victory for Elevate in that one fight, I don't think they snowball as hard. I think getting the 4 dead when they got them dead allowed them to kind of push things like that and get that lead that they snowballed so hard off of. The reason why I liked the Trifecta composition was it was a very simple composition to understand. It was cage them in, keep them in the cage, and then blow up the cage.
Yeah.
Very simple to understand, very simple to execute. They just tried it a little bit too early, in my opinion, because in that composition, like you said, you've got 3 frontliners and 2 damage dealers. Well, that early, your damage dealers don't have damage. So no numbers survives it, and then they turn it on its head, and it's a 4-0.
See, that's also why I think it kind of... Yeah, go ahead.
They snowball off of that 4-0 wipe. I believe after that they took Portal Demon. I don't know if they invaded the buffs. I don't know if they invaded Trifecta's buff. I can't think right now. But they were able to snowball off of that one fight really hard. By the time it got late game and it turned into a 5v5, Snoopy couldn't do anything to help have the damage, because they had gotten, Elevate had gotten all the Gold Furies, gotten all the mid camps, gotten, basically all the gold on the map belonged to Elevate.
So, what I think, what you've pointed out there, something that is interesting as well, right? The Zeus, I still think he can work as a sort of substitute hunter, because he has that much damage. But what you said is, in the early game, he really doesn't, and I think you've got a point there, and I think that's part of the reason why it didn't work in general, right? And why you would still have an issue if you tried running this comp against this triple guardian setup, because your mid laner, if it's a hunter, if it's an on her mid or a Hu Yi mid, is going to come online a lot earlier than the mage would, even Zeus. And I think that's something that's problematic as well when you think about it. And it's again why I don't think this comp is necessarily all too different from the one that Elevate was running. Just with a Zeus mid, and Zeus has that disadvantage of coming online a bit later, and that
a lot of
them.
the teams adopted that triple tank 2 hunter later, after Elevate found someone that's off of it. They adopted that same composition. I mean, eUnited won North America finals basically with that same composition. So
yeah,
I mean, I agree that Zeus, there is a lot of damage from the Zeus, but it comes online later once you get some stuff on, once he gets the items online. But again, you didn't, by taking that fight where you didn't give yourself a chance to get Zeus to a point where he is effectively doing damage to these frontliners. Because we know if you build penetration on Zeus with that 3-stack detonate, can do 60% of anybody's health, whether you're Guardian or a Warrior or whatever. It hurts like hell. But they just that failed gang allowed Elevate to just take so much off the map and snowball so hard that Zeus was not a factor. So a little bit of patience from Trifecta, and I think they had a real shot at winning that and forcing a 3-way tiebreaker. But they took the fights too early, and all credit to them. All credit to Elevate where it's due. I mean, they had a composition nobody could figure out. Really, they lost 3 games all weekend, and it was 2 of them were because Obey forced them off of that triple guardian composition, and just energy being just looking better than what they have the entire season.
Yeah.
And the game plan was from energy was very, it was the same throughout the entire wild card. I mean, when we talk about energy in just a little bit, it's going to be very clear where the game plan was. But Elevate did great, in their set against OA. Nobody thought it would go to 5. Nobody even thought it would go to 4. But, they did force a game 5 with that triple guardian composition. Nobody could figure it out in the wild card round, and so here they are. A team we didn't think was going to come out of the weekend was, probably the one European team that we didn't think had a shot at making it to Worlds. They're the ones that are actually going to Worlds.
Yeah, I think they were the least likely to make it, at least. Like, still, if you think about it now, right? If Dake shows up in incredible form, as we said already, I think they make it through. Over this Elevate roster, and I think there's little that energy that would have stopped energy this weekend. And yeah, we're going to talk about them later on. Now, I think it's time to shift the focus to the NA side a bit.
To the finals.
Yeah. Because there we saw at sort of the rematch of the last week of the SPL, right? But this time in a longer set than we saw in the SPL. eUnited against Luminosity battled once again for the top spot in NA. And it was a fun finals to watch, right? A very fun finals to watch.
Oh, I loved it. I thought both teams had great drafts in the games they won. They were able to, really do what they wanted to in the games that they won. But the thing that kind of stands out to me more than anything was the fact that in the games eUnited won, they looked a lot more dominant than Luminosity did in the games that Luminosity won. It was a 3-2 victory for eUnited, And in the games eUnited won, it was not close. The games Luminosity won, it was a lot more competitive. And
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know what else. I mean, what did you see?
Yeah, I think overall they were the better team this weekend, right? They obviously first played against a not that strong trifecta in the semifinals and just flat out 3-0'd them, right? That is already that was already a massive sign of what was to come on Sunday, and there they then really delivered. As you said, the games that they won, they looked really dominant on. It seemed like they really denied LG from having a real shot at taking those games, whereas the games between them and LG seemed like it was a coin toss as to who would actually win the match, and it was a very impressive weekend by them overall. And I think it's worth pointing out LG is a great team as well, right? They had a great weekend themselves. They just weren't able to best eUnited in this regard, sort of. And we really saw every player on eUnited as well going off at least one game, which was impressive to see as well. Right, the depth
really
that this team has.
I really like the fact that Benenu was able to play the Hachiman mid and really make it work. I mean, in the past, Benenu has been a hunter, and he was the hunter for Allegiance in the fall split last season, or in Season 3. And through most of his time in the Challenger circuit, he was a hunter until recently switching to mid just this season. And so he still has that in his wheelhouse. And other than other than Herwin, he's been the one in a mid that has really shown a really good Morgan mid. And so he brings. We were critical on his appointment to this team when we thought Best was the better option, but he has proven that he is more than good enough to be with this team, and the team's just dominant, right? Like, and they looked good doing it too. I mean, I'm gonna bring Dignitas back up. One of the things that the casters alluded to this weekend, is that Dignitas was winning the entire season, and they didn't really learn how to lose effectively.
Yeah.
Now, at the first sign of trouble, we saw Dignitas fall apart. eUnited has been that battle-tested team. That team, they didn't make it to the spring land tournament. They got ousted by Soar in the finals of the Gauntlet. They barely missed DreamHack in the summer, and then they're dominant in the fall here, and they've really learned how to deal with the losses where Dignitas really didn't. And so the losses to Luminosity, which is still the only NA team to have beaten eUnited, eUnited didn't look like it. They let them affect them as much.
Yeah, and obviously I think it's easier to not be affected by losing 2 games in a best of 5 set than it is to be affected by just getting stomped 3-0 and losing 1 game in an incredibly close fashion where you should have won, right? We talked about that already. So, yeah, they showed mental fortitude, and obviously they have it, right? And that is part of what makes this team strong, I think. And obviously they also have a massive amount of talent. As you said already, Venenu has really stepped it up. He's playing leagues better than what I expected going into this split and going into this latter half of the season, really. And Benji in solo, we've talked about him a lot already, that he has the potential to be the best solo laner in the world. Scream had an amazing weekend as well, right? In a lot of the games that they won, he looked very dominant himself. And then you go to the dual lane side with PBM and Panda, who are both just incredibly solid in basically every game they play. So this team has massive amounts of raw talent, and then they have they look like a unit as well, right? Which is what really was lacking from Dig in comparison this weekend.
I think this team. I think this eUnited team's the best NA team that NA has produced in really 2 seasons. I think this is the best. If there's one team at Worlds from North America that can win Worlds, it's probably gonna be eUnited, because they are the best team we've had in 2 seasons from our region, and they've got the talent to do it and the strategies to do it. And the one thing that I think separates eUnited from the rest of North America, and really the rest of North America these past 2 seasons, is just the fact that Benji and Scream work so well together. And we saw teams like Energy last year with Demi and Adapting. They had Adapting was the star, but Demi was the setup guy and was really the team player, and they really worked together really well. Going back to Season 1 Worlds, Confrey and Repicos worked so well together, and Evo, Fred, and Variety, and it was Captain Twig and whoever you want to put in that solo lane. But it's really been that combination, that Scream Benji combination, and the fact that the rest of the team is so solid that if that combination doesn't pop off and have a crazy game, that the other 3 can step up. Like last year's Energy team, if Adapting wasn't going off, you could always turn to Emilito or Yemen to really hold down the fort and win the game off of their backs instead of just Adapting's back. And I think this is what eUnited has now in this current team, that is Scream and Benji are going to be the stars of the team and make a lot of the plays happen, but when teams focus them out, the other 3 are more than capable of carrying the games by themselves.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes a good team, and a team that's going to be consistently good, right, is having multiple avenues to win games, multiple win conditions, sort of. And that's definitely something that this roster has, yeah. And yeah, I think you make a good argument there as well, that specifically the combo of jungle and solo laner that they have now is probably the best that we've seen out of NA in the last 2 years. Yeah, I mean, what combos have we had during that time? We've had a good one with Pern and Divios, I think. We've had Weaken and Cyclone back in Season 2.
Yeah, but Cyclone's the star of that combination.
Yeah.
Or is a little bit front with Benji and Scream. They're a little bit closer talent-wise.
Yeah.
Weaken and Cyclone. Cyclone's the star. Weaken's the setup guy. And then the rest of Weaken and Cyclone's teams have not been really good since leaving AFK. But
yeah, just
other,
the point.
Baskin and Homie Faye. We've had Baskin and Annister. We've had what else have we had? DJ and Divios. That's right.
Need to think about this a bit more.
Pretty much it. I mean, Benji and Homie Faye, but that was a disappointing combination. Masked and Benji for the spring split last year, but that didn't end well. I mean, they didn't argue and hate each other, but the end of the split didn't end well. So, and then they split apart. So, but Scream has gone with Marauder, who was a decent solo laner, wasn't a superstar like Benji was, Aruzzi's, but that was for only like 2 weeks. So
Yeah. And yeah, I think,
yeah,
as I said, I think the rest of the team is the bedrock upon which the Scream and Benji can sort of try and build stuff, because the analogy works that way. And yeah, I'm not sure what I'm trying to say. I'm just trying to say that so mid, support, and solo, Venenu, PBM, and Panda, they are usually going to be consistently showing up, right? And Benji and Scream, they're a bit more volatile, which makes them harder carries than the rest, but which also makes them a bit more have a bit more of a tendency to have bad games as well. And I think that's a great way to have a team set up. And yeah, we can look at other teams historically that work the same way, right? Energy, as you already pointed out. I think this Dig roster has a lot of similarities to that as well, right? Because you always have sort of tricks showing up, and you have Variety and QO also being very volatile. And it's sort of what makes a good team in Smite, I think, is largely defined by having a volatile solo side and then a bedrock dual lane side and mid lane, right? And or just in general having a strong bedrock, and then having volatile players on top of that can pop off and that can win you games by themselves.
and you look at the EU teams that have been so successful this year. Captain Twig and, well, up to this past split was Maniac, is now Zelia, but and then Adapting and Maniac and who else? QO Fred and Variety. I mean, they all have that solid, volatile jungle solo lane that can carry alone, but then you also have Prime and Ataraxia, or Yaman and Emilito, or Wolfie and Vote that can cover their asses when they don't have a good game.
Yeah, so I'm in conclusion, sort of, I'm very interested to see what this team is going to bring, this eUnited roster is going to bring to Worlds, because there are chances that I think they can compete with the top EU teams, which I don't think I would have said before this weekend, but they did look good.
And then on the other side of the coin, Luminosity, I mean, they're coming out of this weekend, they're battle tested, right? I mean, Space Station gave them a 5-game set. eUnited took them to a 5-game set. They're basically the same team that took Energy to a 5-game in the semis of the past 2 seasons. So, Luminosity's not going to be an easy out for anybody in Europe either. I mean,
yeah.
I think eUnited, I think Luminosity is a little bit easier to handle than eUnited will be, but I don't see it being easy because because Hindu Man himself said it, that these North American teams aren't the same teams that they were in the summer or in the spring of this year. They're vastly improved, and you have to take them serious at Worlds, because if you're not taking them serious, they're going to beat you.
Yeah.
And I think that pretty much wraps it up with these 2 NA teams that are making it to Worlds. They're not going to be easy outs. They're 2 of the best teams NA has produced these last 2 years, and if Obey or if Energy or Elevate don't come to play, they're going to get beat.
Yeah, they're going to be challenged at least, and I think that's the interesting thing to look forward to, right? Because in the summer and spring, we really only saw the like 4th place EU team be challenged by the first or second place NA team, right? Looking back at DreamHack Valencia, the set between Energy and Trifecta. Now it looks like eUnited might actually be able to compete against a rival or against an Obey. And if that is the case, then we could be in for an exciting Worlds. Right now, I still think...
They got to do it against Obey first.
Yeah, right now I still think that we might see an all-EU finals. And I hope we see one because, you know, I get to make tons of jokes about NA for another year. So think about that.
Well, it's a little bit too early for predictions, but I'm going with
Dude, you were predicting an NA team to win Worlds since like middle of the spring split.
I'm talking about predictions for the matchup.
Oh,
a little too early to make predictions for the matchup. So I'm making a prediction for the matchup, and I'm hoping that it's eUnited versus Rival because that's going to be a great set.
Is that even? Yeah, it is possible, definitely, because they're both first seeds.
They're both on the opposite side of the mat. They're both on opposite sides of the bracket, and the only time they're going to face each other is at the finals. So,
yeah,
I mean,
I think so. If I'm not mistaken, United's going to have to go through Obey first, which, assuming they make it that far, right? Obey or Energy or Elevate, like probably two of those. Or at least one of those, which is gonna be tough.
To deal with them.
Yeah. See, I'm not expecting too much out of Luminosity. I think they are going to challenge the EU teams, but I would be surprised if a rival drops a set to them.
Jeff and Barra have made it to at least the semifinals in every Worlds they've been to. So.
Yeah, well, did they? Okay, I need to think about this, right? Last time, they obviously didn't beat an EU team to get there because both the EU teams were in the finals. The year before, did they beat an EU team to get there?
The semifinals, the past 2 years, the eventual world champions had to beat Jeff and Barra. Energy and Epsilon, same team, but different names. Epsilon beat Cloud9 in a best of 5, and Energy beat Luminosity in a best of 5. That's the semifinals for the past 2 years.
So what you're saying is that Rival's going to win Worlds?
I mean, if everything stays the same as it's been the past 2 years,
yeah, okay, I can live with that.
I mean, anyway. If beating Jeff and Barra is the key, Rival has to beat Jeff and Barra to move on to finals. I guess that's what I'm saying. But I'm still looking forward to the eUnited Rival set if we get it.
Yeah, it should be an interesting one. And
because Benji versus Deathwalker, I mean that's
Ice versus Scream.
How when are we gonna get to see that match? Otherwise, Benji versus Deathwalker.
Carlos against PBM, the two big guys.
I'm more excited for Benji versus Deathwalker because those are the two hard carries for their team, and they're both incredibly great players at LAN.
Yeah. So, since we've already talked about Rival now, let's talk about them a bit more. That doesn't make any sense, but we're still going to do it. Rival, they obviously ended up winning the EU side of things, right? They are your European champions at like 2 a.m. here in Europe.
They embarrassed Dignitas and they pounded Obey. I mean, the most impressive team of the weekend, probably Rival by a mile. And I was impressed by eUnited, but I'm more impressed by Rival than anything else. They embarrassed Dignitas to the point where they find the win. Could barely beat worst NA team that came to this land. And Obey, I don't know what it is about Obey, but Obey has lost 3-1 since DreamHack. They've lost 2 sets to, or 2, 5-game sets to right one.
Yeah. And I think in both sets, Obey just didn't look good at all, right? I think thinking back to DreamHack Valencia, we saw sort of a similar thing to what we saw here, in that Twig just wasn't able to do much at all, at least in most of the games that he played, and that the rest of Obey, just due to Twig not being himself in those sets, sort of wasn't able to do anything in follow-up.
The God-given talent wasn't there, right?
Yeah. I mean, they had one. Obviously, they won a game still, but even that game, it didn't look like it didn't. It wasn't dominant. Whereas 2 of the 3 games that Rival won were really dominant.
Well, Rival has this. I mean, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion now that they're beast at lands. They're Lanimals, or whatever analogy you want to use with this Rival team. They're just really good at land, and they prove it again. And Obey is the victim one more time. I mean, it did not look like an Obey team that we're used to seeing, and they didn't. Rival didn't try any cheese comps like Elevate did. This is a straight up with meta comps. Like, saw a lot of the meta picks being picked in this set, and Obey Rival beat the crap out of them.
I mean, they did run Nox jungle at Nox support, but they lost that game, so Rival.
Yeah, but that's not like you think of Nox and how Elevate runs her with the silence field and the lockdown. Nox can be one of the few mages that plays that Guardian support without a heal. Like, a lot of the mages that are played in that support usually have a heal. Nox is the one exception to that rule. And so,
I mean, the only viable mage support that we've really seen since Season 0 has been the Hell, right?
The Hell, the Aphrodite has been run a few times in the support role.
Really?
I think mostly by Aurora. I don't know if anybody else is.
That makes sense as well.
But the mage supports, the ones that are often run in that support role, usually have a heal somewhere in their kit. Nox is the exception to that rule. I mean, unless you want to throw it back to Big Man Tings and the John Quee support, which I love, by the way. I love. But,
right.
But that they didn't actually win that game with the John Quee support.
I still don't get it, but yeah, I'm sure. Like, if he wants to run it, he can do that, I guess. But yeah, I think it's worth pointing out that, as you said, they ran those normal comms, right? We saw assassin jungles out of this rival team. We saw double warrior comms out of this rival team, which is sort of what we've seen during the rest of the season, really, right? And it's interesting that they ran those types of comms and that Obey ran those types of comms as well, when for the rest of the tournament we really saw those triple tank comms really find success, and most specifically the triple guardian double hunter comms that we didn't see run at all by this rival team here, and also not by Obey. So maybe the normal meta still makes sense. That's all I'm saying.
Well, again, I believe it was F Dot that said, running the meta is not how you win, not how you separate yourself, but combination of your own stuff and the meta. And so, we're still going to get Ares Walker and Gab Walker and stuff like that from Death Walker, but and when was the last time when was the last time you saw ISIS this split? I mean, ISIS mid this split. I mean, only Wolfie, and so
Yeah. Let me check.
it's a rival with rival. It's a combination of the meta stuff, like the Kraken jungles and the warrior jungles and the Hoagies and the Ganeshas and the stuff we're used to seeing. But there's also, you know, Raw from Wolfie, Isis from Wolfie, Death, Bologna and Geb and Ares. It's a combination of the two with this rival team, and I think that's why they found so much success, because they're able, especially at these LAN events where they can feed off of each other, and communication is so much easier between the teammates, that they take the meta and they add a little bit of their flair to it and make it actually turns out to be a success.
Yeah. So
Obey
just quickly about the ISIS pick, right? In the fall split, she was picked once.
by Wolfie.
I don't know. I'm just reading the stats.
But she was picked up twice in this set against Obey, both by Wolfie.
3 times, I think. I think it was 3 times.
Was it 3 times? I know it was at least twice.
Twice, yeah, it was twice actually. And yeah, and I think that's the point here is rival. There are sort of running. I think there's like, this is a vanilla comp, right? This is a season 1 comp, basically, is having a warrior solo, assassin jungle, a mage mid, a guardian support, and a hunter ADC. That's basically what you run, but they are still putting sort of their own twist to it by putting the Isis mid, or by putting, well, the Vulcan mid, although, well, Vulcan is also pretty prime squad. They still have their own picks within that standard setup, and then they have a chance to innovate even more. And I think that's what makes this team especially scary going into Worlds. They didn't show much here, right? The most insane thing they showed was the Nox support, which had already been shown by Elevate. I'm sure they have more stuff up their sleeves, right? Because this is rival we're talking about. This is Ares Walker. I think there are at least 3 more picks that are going to be as surprising as Ares Walker, and I think they can get even more than that ready for Worlds.
I'm predicting Anubis Walker at Worlds.
Oh, please no. Don't pull an eager on us.
It'll be an Anubis Walker or an Outwash Walker or something out of the normal that he brings out and somehow makes work. I think he and Benji are the only two.
I think if anyone's going to make it work, it's going to be Deathwalker, but I still don't see it working because it's Anubis, it's Outwash, and it's not a good version of Outwash, right? And Anubis, the only time Anubis works is in show matches. It's literally the only time I've seen him do well in an SPL game, I think. Or in a professional match.
It's rival. There's going to be some troll matches.
Yeah. How would you even... Like, you would have to have basically 2 people on the solo side of the map all the time. And one of them would need to be a Gap, the other one would need to be a Capri to keep the Anubis alive.
Alright, yeah, but moving on.
Yeah. Point being, they did look good against Away. And they looked even better, arguably, against Day.
And Prom and Twig were for me in this set. Prime in the set against Elevate didn't have a particularly amazing set. But Twig in this set against Obey just didn't look like himself, and it was not putting all the blame on Zelia because Deathwalker is a little bit hard to handle. But in that game 4, that final game where Deathwalker is up 5 levels, like it was like level 13 to level 8 or something, and Zelia was far behind, and Twig just couldn't do anything to help him. Every time Twig would go over there, he would die.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, they both ended the game. Zelia on 0-8 and 3, and Twig on 0-7 and 1. So that already tells you how badly this last game went for them specifically, and how badly the overall set went for them.
I don't know how Zelia, how somebody ends up getting that far behind, but it somehow happened. And
well, see,
Twig suffered for it.
See, the way you do it is you run Cabrakan into 2 warriors, one of which has a taunt on a 90-second cooldown and a knock up on a 18-second cooldown, I think.
Yeah, 18. Erlong Shin. Yeah, 18-second cooldown.
And one of which has an ult that also knocks you up in one of his forms. And they just dive you at level 5. And you're a Cabrakan. All you can do is try to run, but you're not going to run from an Erlong Shen and a Kokolin. And your tournament is not there to support you.
He got really bad on that side of the map, and with Zelia behind, Twig suffered, and that's usually the case. If your solo lane is struggling, your jungle's going to be hurt as well.
Yeah, well, if your solo lane's that far behind, right, it's no longer your jungle. It's their secondary jungle.
That's right. It's no longer when you're that far behind. You don't have a house in the jungle anymore. You're setting up shop at your back camps and hoping they don't come that far.
Yeah, those buffs are no longer yours.
It's Deathwalker has 2 blue buffs and 2 speed buffs if he wants it.
Yeah.
But it's Scary D and Mask in the summer had that problem. Scary D got so far behind, Maskus really didn't have any kind of effect on the game, and this is exactly what happened with Twig here. Zelia has been great for Obey this split, not in the set though. That was a really bad one for him.
Yeah, I think this is the worst set that I've seen him play since he has come back, really.
I mean, he looked really good on Kokolin. 13-0 in one game this past split, but
yeah,
that's the high point, and this is the low point. He's still going to Worlds, so there's that. But
yeah,
really not the Zelia we've come used to seeing with this Obey team.
Yeah, and I think one other person we need to criticize is Prime. And I think it's not necessarily even his play, it's just also the type of picks he went for. Right, in the finals against Rival, I think we saw the Giannis twice. And Giannis, I don't think is a Prime god, and we saw the Zeus twice, and yeah, Zeus is a god he can run, but I don't think it's one of his best. I think he needs a more mobile mage to do well, right? If that makes any sense.
A mobile mage that does a lot of damage.
Yeah, he doesn't need Giannis. He doesn't need Giannis levels of mobility.
Giannis is the mobile mage, but yeah, you're right. The Toth, the dashes from Toth, the backfires from Vulcan. What's the move called? Thunderclap or Thunder Crash from Raijin. I mean, these are the gods that he excels at. Gods that have these dashes that can can get him in and out of trouble that also have ultimates that do a crap load of damage.
Yeah, and I think when you
And
put him
not
on the Zeus, he just has to stay that far back that he's not going to impact fights enough, or he's just going to get killed. And it wasn't necessarily that he got killed all the time in this set. It just didn't seem like he was doing enough damage overall to really help up the team. What?
We can't forget, Isis is somewhat of a counter to Zeus. I mean, is the mobility, the running down. She has the circle of protections that really hurts Zeus's ult. You know, the shred protections with the in the long range stun. I mean, she's a good counter.
I'll have you know that they actually banned Isis in both the games where they picked Zeus.
Oh, they did.
Yeah.
So smart play by Obey, but it still didn't work out.
Yeah. And yeah, I think Prime needs to be put on those carry gods, right? And not necessarily the Zeus, but other carry mid laners. And because we've talked about Celia and Twig having the ability to really go off already, and I think Twig is the other person within this team that can go off. And he didn't do it on really any game this weekend, or at least on no games in this rival against Obey's set. And I think that really hurt Obey, because it is something that you sort of have to rely on as well if your Obey is on your mid laner going off, if you have potentially the best mid in the world in Pretty Prime, right? And that's not what we saw this week, really.
We saw a very passive Pretty Prime this week. That's not. You want him to be safe, but you don't want him to be passive. And he's just been, from what I saw in the games that they had, the 9 games that they played, it's just a really quiet weekend from Prime. And well, like you said, with one of the best mid laners in the world, probably the best mid laner in the world, you don't want a quiet weekend from him if you're expecting to win or to take the number 1 seed.
Yeah. And yeah, I want to see what Obey's going to change going into Worlds, right? Because I think they need to lean on drafts that are giving him gods that he has a higher carry potential on. And I think they need to...
I don't think they need to put him on gods that he has a lot of carry potential on. Something that's a little bit more impactful. Nice. Something that, he doesn't have to throw out the ult and one-shot somebody, but can, use multiple tools to do damage and to poke out and let Twig finish off the kills with the Rat and, Ataraxia running the stuff like Izanami and those stuff. Just something with a little bit more effectiveness. You don't have to particularly put him on a hard carry like a one-shot Vulcan ult, but something he can utilize to its full potential and still do what he wants to do, what we come to expect from Prime.
Yeah. And yeah, the Raijin was also banned, by the way, in every game from Rival. So a smart move from them as well. Because he actually had pretty good games against Elevate as well. Right? Just Raijin, he's an early game carry, not a late game carry, right? And it works if it works, but it also doesn't work if it doesn't work.
Wow.
That's deep analysis, man.
That's some yin and yang shit right there.
Yeah. Nah, just the point is, you need to sort of end games fairly early on.
Oh, crap.
What?
I've got the European Anatoly.
That is not a compliment, by the way. If it's coming from you, that's not a compliment.
I didn't mean it to be a compliment.
Yeah, I know. I just want to explain to everyone who's listening to this and watching this. if it's coming from Sabo, if Sabo is calling you, if Sabo's comparing you to Anatoly, it's not a compliment.
All right, look. All right.
So let me explain. Let me
first game,
on Anatoly myself, please. Just real quick.
All right, you explain, and then I'll explain why I don't like Anatoly.
Yeah, let me explain myself real quick. So what I mean when I say that it works, unless it doesn't work, is you need to end games early if you are drafting the Raijin, in my opinion, because he is going to fall off. He's not going to do as much damage as comparable other mages or hunter mids going into the late game. And if you don't get to that stage, and if you get to that stage, then you are going to put yourself behind. So yeah, like if you're even in the late game with a Raijin, you're actually behind. Now explain why you don't like Anatoly.
All right, example of why I don't like Anatoly. First game he broadcast this weekend, LG versus Space Station, is talking about the split the split that two teams had during the fall, and first words out of his mouth is Space Station lost game 1 because they gave up too much.
Well, you
no
cut out
shit,
there.
Sherlock.
You cut out there for a moment. What did he say? Again.
He said Space Station lost the first game in their fall split against LG because they gave up too much damage on their Titan.
Oh yeah.
And I just put my hand on my face and I said, "No shit, Sherlock. That's how you lose every game."
Unless you surrender.
States the obvious. Too much, and I don't know Anatoly personally. I don't hate him in person. His casting is just terrible. Like, why you state the obvious so damn much? No,
yeah.
You lose every game because you give up too much damage on your Titan, you moron. Don't have to tell people that.
See, I think he meant it more specifically in the sense that they let too many minions through when they had Phoenixes down, didn't defend against those properly enough, and that just led to LG being able to easily finish off the Titan because it was already low when they just needed to kill 3 more waves to survive.
You know who else gave up too much damage on their Titan? Flashpoint and Allegiance.
Yeah.
They're out of the league. Like,
yeah.
You don't have to state the obvious so goddamn much, and to not even like I said, I don't know him personally. I don't know the guy in real life. Just off his cast alone, I want to slap him the first time I meet him and say, "Don't fucking state the obvious so much."
See, I think he means it differently from what he's saying. I think that's actually what he meant. I think he meant that they had a Phoenix down or 2, and they let too many minions through the Titan. It got poked down, and they should have defended that lane instead of trying to aggress on the Fire Giant, the Fire Giant, right? And I think it just says it in a terrible way, because that's how he talks.
He didn't elaborate. He basically just said that they lost because they gave up too much damage on their Titan.
Yeah. So what you're saying is, I am actually the European Anatoly.
Yeah, you have to elaborate. Like, okay, they gave up too much damage on their Titan because LG was able to poke down a few Phoenixes and take out a few Phoenixes. And Fire Minions finished because there was nobody back to fend off the Fire Minions. But to simply say they gave up too much damage on their Titan, everybody knows that's how you win the game. When you kill the enemy Titan, the game's over. And it's like, elaborate a little bit. Say something other than that, because if you just say that, then you're like, well, okay, LG must have broken the vase and killed the Titan themselves, not that fucking Fire Minions did it. You're just you're pointing out the same way every damn game ends. And if you're an SPL viewer and you watch the SPL, you fucking know the game is over. You don't have to have that pointed out to you.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate for a bit, right? Because I get what he's saying. I think his issue is not that he's not capable of deep analysis, right? I think his issue is that he just states things and just leaves them there because he doesn't have time to elaborate. But he should really, if he's going to say something like that, you need to elaborate on it, like I did, right? I explained my stupid Raishin comment because it needed to be explained. Otherwise it's a stupid Raishin comment.
I mean, and just if that situation comes up, just don't say it. I mean, like, don't say they lost because they gave up too much damage on their Titan. Just say, they lost the game that they really should have won, and it should have been a 2-0 set victory for Space Station.
See, and I think that's Anatoly's issue. I think that's Anatoly's big issue, is he isn't thinking about what he can say within the confines of the 10 seconds that he's allowed to talk as a caster, right? So he just says his sentence and then it's a stupid sentence because he didn't think that unless he has 25 seconds to explain it exactly, it's going to be a stupid sentence.
I mean, he and Taco can learn from each other then.
Are you saying that?
Because...
okay, I need you to elaborate on that as well.
I'm about to. He states the obvious, and it sounds really stupid. And Taco listened to her cast back, when she had first started. She doesn't do so much of it now. She's gotten better at it. But when she first started, when Hindu Man or F. Dot or anybody would ask her a question about like why this was being done, if she didn't have anything to say about it, she would talk about it. Like she would just ramble on about the same thing until she found something to say on the topic.
So basically how our podcasts go when we try to talk about burrito.
Like example, like it's not exactly an example, but like if Hindu Man asks her like, why the Cupid here and not some other hunter? And it should be like, well, I think because with what Cupid likes to do and all, blah, 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 blah. Oh, and the ultimate is impactful and they really need that ultimate there. It's like, okay. I mean, you took 20 seconds to reach the point, and the rest, like the last 5 seconds was the point, and you spent the first 15 seconds rambling on, just trying to come up with what the last 5 seconds was. But she did that over and over again, and she's gotten better at it. I'll give her credit to that, but like Toly can learn from Taco, and Taco can learn from Toly. I'm like,
see, I think what needs to happen is
if you're gonna state something stupid, don't say it, or get straight to the point and don't ramble on, even if it sounds stupid.
See,
I like them both. I like them both. I don't like their casting. Put them on the desk. Let them do analysis on the desk. They're great at it.
Oh, but I don't like Toly on desks. Unless he's like, the best thing about Toly on desks is always him just wearing his shirt open.
Yeah, and his chest hair. You usually say that. I mean,
that chest hair is fucking insane, man. But yeah, no. What I want to say is, I think the solution to this is very simple. You just lock Toly and Taco in the same room for a month, and then when they come out, Taco's going to be able to finish every one of Toly's thoughts.
Oh my god!
So when Toly says that they lost the game because they gave up too much damage to the Titan, Taco is going to explain why. And because she had time to think about it while Toly was talking, because she already knew what he was going to say, she will finish it quickly.
Yeah, I see what you're getting at. My mind went, when you said lock them into a closet for a month, I was like, my mind went to a completely different area. Completely different area.
See, I'm an innocent European, so I don't have...
Innocent my ass. Alright.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the other teams. let's say something about the other teams, and let's. I guess the best place to start is with Energy. I mean, they went 5-0 this round, and they looked. I don't want to say they looked like the old Energy because they really didn't look like the old Energy, but adapting looked like, looked a lot comfortable, a lot more comfortable. He did this weekend, and I think the game plan was obvious, right? I mean, where did he start out? Where did he put most of his focus on? And that was, putting Maniac ahead and really causing, you know, variety and no numbers and Gary D. It really focused, on that side of the map, and it hurt that side of the map. And as a result, like guys like Cubo Fred and Homie Faye and all the junglers couldn't really get anything going. It was kind of like what Luminosity did in Game 1 against eUnited during the final week of the fall split. By putting so much focus on that side of the map and really taking the solo laner and the jungler off and splitting them apart, really allowed Energy to find the success they did. That looked like the game plan the entire weekend. Like every game, Adapting and Maniac were over there on that side of the map, just running things on that side of the map.
Yeah, and I think it makes a lot of sense, right, in the current meta to go and do that. That's why I also think LG did the same thing, because there is so much farm right now on this solo side of the map, right? There are fire elementals, there are the buffs, obviously, there are back amps, and if you can manage to get a lead, you can invade there, and if you get that invade going, their jungle is going to be put behind from the get-go, and is not going to be able to then in turn invade your jungle either, or actually defend his own buffs and the Oracle Harpies on the left side of the map, right? And that can just spiral out of control. If you can keep the jungle behind, then deny him all that farm, you can then just start fighting him because he can't possibly fight into you. And I like the way that Energy did it this week, honestly.
Well, see, that's the story of the entire fall split, right? I mean, whichever team gains control of that solo lane side of the map and the farm on that side of the jungle usually ends up controlling and winning the game. And Energy finally caught on to that. I mean, they really, up to this weekend, that really wasn't their game plan. I mean, you didn't see Adapting and Maniac all together that much. I mean, yeah, Adapting when Demi was on a team, that's what they would do all the time. Adapting was really focused on that side of that. They brought Maniac in. Maniac's a little bit more of a hard carry than Demi ever was, and can win that lane by himself. But that's not how the meta was going and how the games were being played. And with Adapting shifting his focus to other places, that hurt Energy. And so when you go back to that style that Energy really dominated on and won the last 2 world championships with, that's where we see the Energy of old return.
Yeah, and I think it's still a bit different, right? I think Demi was generally someone who played for the late game. I think it's been said plenty of times before already. Whereas Maniac is able to have a more of a carry effect in the early to mid game, so it makes even more sense to put more focus onto him instead of Demi, right? And what I also liked seeing out of Energy here is actually Adapting, sort of expanding the way he plays the game, right? He used to always play carry assassins and to always build them in a carry way, and we didn't really see that this weekend either, or at least we didn't see it in all the sets he played. He built very tanky in a lot of them and was more there to facilitate the rest of the team, which he did great this time, right? That was one thing I was worried about him in the fall split, was that he wouldn't be able to do that. He at Listan, he seems to have proven me wrong.
Yeah, and the one thing or the one instance that really stands out to me was in that game against Noble, where he brought out Thor, and we're so used to him carrying on Thor and building these damage items, and he built Tanky Bruiser, and it shows a different side of his playing ability that we thought he struggled on these non-carry, non-damaging assassins, and if he built tanky on them, or if he played a warrior that built tank on him, that he didn't have that he had, that we were used to seeing from him. And to bring out one of your most iconic assassins that you play and building completely different and have on it, start to think that adapting is maybe finally starting to catch on to how the game is being played in Season 4. And that's a very scary idea for the other teams that are going to Worlds.
Yeah, I think it's been an issue for Energy that they were sort of confined to this meta where adapting had to play the carry because that was his one role that he was amazing at. And if the same adapting shows up at Worlds and is able to play these setup gods at Worlds and play them actually in a setup way, unlike what we've seen in the past, I'm excited to look forward to what they can do as well, right? Because they didn't just make it through this 5-0. They looked dominant in most of the games that they played, right? They dominated Trifecta, for instance.
It's like I said, it's a scary thought to have Energy back to where they are playing well. Not great like they were in Season 2 and Season 3 when they won World, but playing well enough that you're kind of, their experience and these other factors that they bring when they bring to the game. I mean, all of Season 3, after they won Season 2, Energy's games were already won before the first pick was ever picked up, because they had that fear. They had that fear factor about them. Other teams were afraid of them.
Yeah.
And kind of lost that at last year's Worlds. And in the very first set of Season 4, Obey 2-0s them and embarrasses them. And they lose that fear factor. And they really haven't gained that fear factor back all season. And at Super Regionals, when they go 5-0 and they look really good at doing it, you start to think maybe their other teams are starting to worry that Energy is back, and that worry can lead to that fear factor returning, where Energy has the game won before the first pick is even made. And it's going to be a tough out. Energy is going to be someone hard that it's going to be someone hard to deal with. Energy is going to be a team that's hard to deal with. And be careful what you wish for, right? Because a lot of the reports this weekend from just the casting team was that the teams wanted Energy at Worlds because it didn't feel like they were world champions unless they beat Energy. Well, now you have an Energy that's looking like a little bit like the Energy of old, and because this is a team that can, like we've seen, can get hot and can win a third world championship.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think a lot of the teams who said that they wanted to beat Energy at Worlds, or that they wanted to deserve to earn Worlds with Energy there, they need to think now that maybe if Energy is there, which they are now, they're not going to actually be able to win Worlds themselves. And if that's the case, or if Energy shows up in the form that we saw this week, I think they have a chance to actually win it, right? We didn't see them obviously against the top two European teams in Rival and Obey, but from what we saw, from what we've seen from them against the other teams in the Wildcards bracket, they looked amazing.
I mean, the scary thing to think about is Energy's in that placement round. They're not in the, they're going into the quarterfinals. Depending on how they do in that placement round, they could be going up against eUnited or Rival or Obey or Luminosity, and any of
Uh,
the energy can beat any four of those teams, and I mean, that's the placement round. I mean,
yeah,
depending on how well you do in the placement round, determines where you go and who you play in the quarterfinals. And energy, energy can beat any of those four teams. And, I mean, it's something to think about that you may not get to see a rival in the semifinals because energy beat eUnited in the semifinals because energy beat them, and it's something you gotta you don't have to deal with now because that's you got what you asked for.
well, I think they would need to lose a game to lose the first game to actually be matched up against either rival or United.
So,
but them going up against another EU team or Luminosity
or
is an option, right?
Is an option, yeah.
So yeah, Luminosity should be scared. Well, probably. Alright, I have the bracket up right now, actually. So Luminosity is... Okay, Luminosity and Energy will probably meet each other in... No, wait. This is confusing. Okay, they will probably meet each other in the quarterfinals. Because the winner of match 1, which is where Luminosity is playing against Scylla Esports, and the winner of match 2, which is where Energy is playing against the Brazilian team, will meet each other in the quarterfinals.
Are they not doing the round robin type they did the last couple of years?
They've never done round robin at Worlds, actually. They've always had like or at least in the last 2 years, they've had a sort of double elimination bracket that led into a single elimination bracket.
The double elimination and like.
I sent you a link to the screenshot of it, of the brackets.
All right, I'll take a look at them in a minute.
So basically, what you had is you have two 4-team groups, right? And 3 out of those 4 teams advance, and you just play a double LM bracket between those 3 teams, between those 4 teams. So you have 2 first matchups. Both of them go to the quarters. Where the winner of both goes to the quarters, the other 2 get to play each other again for one last spot in the quarters, and you do that with 2 groups. So obviously there's 6 teams going into the quarterfinals. 2 are already there in Rival and United. So yeah.
In the past couple of seasons, they've done, game 1, the winner of game 1 would go on. Game 2 would face the winner of game 2, and then the losers of game 1 and 2 would face off against each other in an elimination game, and the winners of game 1 and 2 would go on to face each other in a game that would determine who got to face the number 2 seed for the quarterfinals. The loser would have to face the number 1 seed, whereas no, the winner would technically be the number 2 seed because they would get the winner of the losers of the 2 loser teams, and then the loser of that would then go face the number 1 team. Confusing, but they would have like a double elimination, like you said. First, if you lose 2 games, you're out. In that placement round, if you lose 2 games, you're out.
Yeah. So yeah, just look at the screenshot at the images I sent you. Right. The first one are the groups basically. The second one is the quarterfinals up to the finals bracket. And as you can see, according to this, right, winner of match 1 and winner of match 2, they were basically to be seed number 2 and 3 on that side of the bracket, right, are meeting each other in the quarterfinals. And winner of match 5, which are the 2 losers from that group, whoever wins out of those, has the honor of of running into rival in the quarterfinals and going home. Unless one of them drops a game, of course. Like one of
Grand finals
Luminosity.
are going to be best of 7? Holy shit.
I'm not sure if this is accurate, honestly. Like, it also, if you look at the semifinals, one is called the NA Finals with Rival in them, and one is called the EU Finals with eUnited on them. Which I guess kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I see that.
So,
Grand final. Man, best of 7's overdoing it, if you ask me.
Yeah, I'm going to stay up until 6 a.m.
Regardless, Energy is going to have to be a team you have to deal with now. If they're looking like old Energy, it's a scary idea that you're going to have to face them in the quarterfinals.
Yeah. Good luck, Luminosity.
Good luck, anybody. Good luck, whoever draws Energy.
Well, it is. If you look at the bracket, it's going to be Luminosity, assuming they both win their first matches.
Yeah, you said you don't know how accurate that bracket is, so there's that.
Yeah, I'm assuming that part is accurate. You know. Anyway, moving on, right? Is there anything else you want to say about Energy specifically? Or shall we move on to the next team that we have on our list?
I'd like to move on.
So yeah, the next team we have on our list is Space Station, and they did look pretty good this week, right? Specifically, Homie Effie had one of his better LAN performances, I'd say.
Yeah, he was. It was a bit of a surprise. His start wasn't all that great. The game one against Luminosity hurt his team by not being in a team fight that Luminosity won and was able to get Fire Giant off of and really take control of the game from there. But in the rest of the set, with the exception of Game 5, which nobody on Space Station looked good in Game 5 because LG dominated in Game 5. But, games 2, 3, and 4, he was a huge factor and played really well in those 3 games. And going into the wild card round, I think he had a good wild card round as well. So, he a lot more than what I expected from him coming into this, just based off past results or the evidence we have from his play at past lands.
Yeah.
So he looked infinitely better this weekend, and that's only if you're Space Station, at least you take that Homie Faye is no longer a liability at lands, that he is capable of having great lands. So going into Season 5, you at least have that going for you, and you're excited for that factor.
Yeah, and I think it's specifically for Homie, something that he can take away from this is that he can perform on LAN if he is in this sort of an environment, right? We don't know if Space Station is going to be sticking together in a similar form of like this going into Season 5. I could imagine maybe Scary being replaced again, because why wouldn't you?
I don't know if you've caught it, but on Twitter, Ataraxia was giving him praise and said that this is the Homie Faye we expected to see, but he's just usually not the Homie Faye we get at LAN. It's just good to see him doing what he does at LAN.
Yeah, we've talked about it a lot already, like in past episodes, past podcasts, about how he usually doesn't show up. Now that he has done it, I want to see if he can replicate that going into the next LAN. And if he can do that, then I look forward to seeing Homie at LAN.
My point is that, we're not the only ones that have noticed it. Other pros have noticed it.
Yeah.
The Ataraxia pointed that out.
So what you're saying is we're right. At least about this thing.
But yeah, we are right. We're right most of the time. But people don't listen to us for some reason.
People can't accept the truth,
I think it might have a little bit to do with your European accent.
And your accent as well.
Yeah, my accent, but
So what you're saying is we need to bring in a British dude, because British accents, man. Anyway,
know anybody British?
well, I know one guy. Well, I know two guys actually. I know a couple of British guys. Most of them not interested in Smite esports. I know two that are, and I've invited one of them to the podcast, and I still haven't gotten a response. And it's not the one you're thinking about right now. Anyway, well, I wanna ask you a specific question going into the next topic. Looking at their performances here, like we obviously saw Space Station going 0-2 in the first day of the Wildcards bracket, and we saw Trifecta going up 2-0. Do you think that was a bit deceptive? And do you think that actually looking over the entire wildcard bracket, that Space Station was clearly the better team?
So, do I think Space Station was better than Trifecta, or do I think it was? No, what are you asking me?
If they were better than Trifecta, yeah.
I thought they were better than Trifecta coming into the weekend. I gave Trifecta the edge during the split because coming off the summer finals, I thought Trifecta was the better team. But going through the fall and seeing just how much trouble they were having adjusting to Aurora, I thought Space Station was the better team, and I thought both of them were going into the wild card round before this weekend came around.
Yeah.
Once they were in the wild card round, though, I thought Trifecta was going to be the better team. I honestly did, because a lot like what Elevate was able to do this weekend, they could come up with these compositions that could baffle their opponents. And I didn't think Trifecta would struggle as much as they did this weekend. Thought they would have much, I thought they would bring in a composition that maybe 3 Guardians and 2 Hunters would, kind of work along those same lines. And I thought they were more flexible in their picks and bans than Space Station was. And I thought that would lead to more success, but I still think Space Station is probably the better of the two teams. If that says anything, if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think it kind of does, right? I think it seemed like a lot of people were expecting Trifecta to do better in this wildcard brackets than they were expecting Space Station to do, especially after the first day, right? Because as I said, they went up 2-0 while Space Station went down to 0-2. And I think what I just think is, if you look at that it wasn't the scoreline didn't tell you everything because of who they had faced, right? I want to say Luminosity instead of Space Station for some reason. Space Station, SSG, not LG, had faced Energy and Elevate, who were looking like the two best teams in the bracket, right? The Wildcards bracket. And when I considered that, I thought that Space Station had more of a chance to go through in day 2 than Trifecta did, just because.
Yeah, just Trifecta had already beaten Dignitas and Noble, and Dignitas not looking like themselves, and Noble struggling late game in these late game team fight scenarios. That I understand. Like, it was just based on the schedule. It looked better for Space Station, even though that they were like 0-2, than it did for Trifecta at 2-0, just based on who they had already played. So
obviously, mathematically, right? Trifecta's chances were a lot better, and what could have made a difference would have been Dig, because once they free rolled around, right, all the pressure was off of them because they were already out going 0-3 in the first day. And Space Station still found the victory over them, which was good. And at that point in time, right, they were relying on Trifecta finding that last victory over Elevate, I want to say.
Yeah, the last game of the weekend was Trifecta versus Elevate.
Yeah, to force a three-way tie, which they obviously then didn't end up doing. So yeah, I think Space Station were really just beaten by eUnited, by Energy and Elevate, not eUnited, looking as good as they did. Not yeah.
They ran into the same issue against Elevate that pretty much everybody had. They couldn't figure out how to beat the 3 Guardians 200 composition.
Yeah.
So that that factor going, the fact that they had to play Energy on the first day with Energy looking so well and nobody being able to figure out how to beat Elevate, kind of doomed Space Station there. They looked, but they were dominant in their games against Dignitas and Noble, and really dominant in their game against Trifecta. But at that point, it was really out of their hands, and they really needed Trifecta to beat Elevate. And we touched on this earlier. We went to great lengths about it, but after that first initial fight where no numbers escapes, Trifecta really didn't. The snowball, they were able to snowball so well that Trifecta was really could not do anything, and as a result, Space Station watched their hopes fall away.
Yeah, and Trifecta as well, obviously, because it was also their only way to stay in the fight, right? If they had also beaten Elevate and forced a three-way tie, including themselves, obviously. And yeah, they weren't able to do that either. And yeah, that's what looking at it after day 1 of this wildcard bracket, I really thought that NA's chances were pretty much over. Just due to the fact that they would need Trifecta to really upset one of the big 2, and I didn't see that happening with how good those 2 had looked. And with Dig probably looking better going back into that, just like Orbit did a year ago, where they played spoiler for Flashpoint, right, and made LG go to Worlds instead. I thought that maybe that would be a risk as well, that Dig would return to some form and would be able to play spoiler for those NA teams as well, specifically for Space Station, obviously.
Kind of like what I said. I thought, I thought Space Station was the better team. I thought Trifecta could find more success in the wild card round, simply because they can run comps and make these comps work that the other teams aren't so adept to. A lot like where Elevate found their success with these weird comps that the other teams weren't prepared for. But it didn't work out for Trifecta as well as it did for Elevate. And so
there were commendable efforts from them, right? They tried to run the Thanatos to counter the tanky picks, because obviously he can execute targets, and it could have worked, but it didn't.
I mean, the weekend, my predictions were Elevate and Dignitas going through going into the EU finals, in Rival and Energy would be coming out of the wild card.
Well, you were predicting Elevate to beat Obey.
I did not say it.
You did say that. Yeah. You did.
I said Elevate had a good chance to beat Obey. I don't know if I said that.
You just said that you were your picks were for Dignitas and Elevate to go to the finals.
I meant Dignitas and Obey to go to the finals.
Okay. That makes more sense.
Rival and Energy would be coming out of the wild card. I thought if there was North American team that was going to steal away a wild card spot. Even though I thought Space Station was the better team, I thought Trifecta would be the one to do it because
Okay. Yeah.
they would be so much harder to deal with in a one game scenario just based on their compositions. That's
Yeah.
what I thought was going to be the case. I thought Trifecta would be the one NA team that really had a shot at winning a wild card spot because of their composition. But I fully expected 2 EU teams to come out of the wild cards. I just didn't think it was going to be Elevate and not Dignitas.
Yeah. Well, I think you're in good company there, honestly. Is there anything else you want to talk about? You want to say about Trifecta, or do you think we've talked about them enough already concerning the other teams when we talked about them meeting with Trifecta?
I really want to talk about Noble. I mean,
yeah.
Unless there's anything you want to say about Trifecta, I really want to get Noble. They're due.
No, I don't think I have anything for Trifecta. But yeah, Noble. Well, what was Noble's issue?
Noble went 0-5 this weekend, but there's a lot of good things if you're Noble to take away from this. Right? You had a massive lead on Dignitas. You had a big lead on Trifecta. You played Elevate really well. The 2 teams that you really didn't play well against were Dignitas and Space Station, but just looking at the other 3 games, their early game was strong. Their pick, finding picks in jungles and getting kills and getting stuff off of, Gold Furies and stuff off of that, the early game picks really looked good and really led to Noble's early game leads. It was the later and later the games went, and once it got into those team fight scenarios, where it really fell apart for Noble. I don't think their team fights were as strong as they wanted them to be and what they needed them to be this weekend.
Yeah. And yeah, I think it's an interesting question why that was the case, right? Because we've not seen Noble be terrible at team fights in the past. Like, they obviously made it here through the gauntlet, made it to Super Regionals through the gauntlet. And they didn't look bad there, right? The level of the rest of the NA teams after the top 4 really drops off quite heavily. But Noble within the gauntlet looked dominant themselves, but it didn't translate into any success whatsoever going into Super Regionals here. And specifically those late game team fights, I really wonder why that was the case, why they weren't able to find any success there, even against a Dignitas that was in tatters, right?
Yeah, I still say Noble, if they improve a little bit in just their as the game gets later, being able to group up and actually use their comps effectively in that group situations to where they're not just completely falling apart. I mean, you said Dignitas was in shatters. They were just destroyed by rival, and you had a 12K gold lead on a Dignitas that was really not themselves, and you still not able to find the win. And it was mainly during that mid to late game transition to where you just fell apart in the team fights. So the future looks good for Noble, and I was high on this team coming into the split, but that was before they went Aquarius. And Aquarius had a great weekend too. I'll say that real quick while I'm on the topic of Aquarius. He had a great weekend.
Yeah.
But the Noble, the reason I was so high on Noble was because they looked like a team that could do something given time. Now they've shown it to us that they can play the early to mid game effectively and really well. They just now need to somehow find a way to transition into that later game more effectively. Because they had Trifecta on the ropes, they had Dignitas on the ropes, and they had Elevate right where they wanted, and they blew leads to all three of those teams.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see if they stick together, right? I would hope they do so, or I would hope they don't make too drastic changes. Maybe, bring in the best, because why not?
Boswell looked good. I mean,
yeah, but it's the best.
Yeah, but we've been saying it's the best for a split now, and he's still no-show. I mean, it's like there's got to be something there that they see, and Boswell did it. They don't see fans, so.
Well, maybe they should get glasses then.
I think, but
Walrus had glasses.
What?
Walrus had glasses.
Walrus had goofy glasses.
Yeah.
But the future is bright. The future is bright for Noble.
Which is good. Which is good again, because Walrus's glasses look like they were tinted. So it's going to be good to protect them from the bright light.
They're obviously one of the 6 teams that are going to be in the North American SPL next season. And together, and they grow as a team, and they can start making noise in NA. Could be top 3 next split. They still got a lot of work to do.
Okay, you're really starting to cut out now. Not sure what's causing it.
I don't know.
Yeah. So if you want to make your last point about Noble, you have to do it quick.
I'm excited for the future of Noble. I think they have some stuff to work on, but if they can clean up some of that stuff, that they should be top 4 next split, if not top 3. I think they got a lot of young talent, and I'll be excited to see what they can do next season.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Like, I don't know if this team needs changes right now. I think it's still a little bit. It's still not enough time that we've seen from the 2 new additions to see if they will actually be able to drastically improve this team, right? If they do over time, then this team has a shot at making waves in Season 5. Especially if the meta sort of changes in their favor as well.
Here's what you do. You release Wubbin and you bring in Pain WR.
Yeah, maybe. But then you would break up the double Ws.
Triple Ws. Wowie, Wubbin, and Walrus.
Yeah, but Walrus is on the other side of the map.
Still 3 Ws. Jeez.
Well, in that case, you should bring in more people. Or, I can tell you about something that I thought about a while back regarding Noble. It's going to be a joke, by the way, just so you're warned. So here's the thing. You need to put Wubbin in solo and make him reverse his name. Then you put Wowie in jungle. Then you put Wubbin again. No, you put Skilodon in solo. Reverse his name from Skilodon to Noddle. Then you put Wowie in jungle.
All right, Stop. You're
No. It's gonna be great. It's gonna
no,
be great.
no longer funny now. You're just droning on.
No, it's gonna be
It's
great.
sad.
Listen to me. It's gonna be great. You will regret not hearing this. So yeah, okay. Then you put. I lost my train of thought now. Okay, then you put Walrus in support, and then you get another guy, a new guy instead of Mosswell, whose fifth letter in the name is an E. Then you put him in ADC. And the whole idea is you end up with a team where the letters of their names spell noble.
Who's the O?
Well, it's Skilodon reversed. No, it's Wowie. Wowie. So, you know, the second letter in Wowie's name is an O. So you have Skilodon.
I already regret hearing this.
Anyway, let's move on to something that you will actually like. MVPs. I don't have mine prepared, so you're gonna have to start.
Well, I mean, it's pretty easy for me to pick out MVPs. I mean, for EU finals, it was Deathwalker. I mean, what else is there to say? He's pretty much the star player of a really good team, and he proved that. He made Zelia look like a very average player, and Zelia has not looked like an average player this entire split. He looked a really good player, and Deathwalker just straight up took it to him. Over in NA, I mean, the NA finals, I mean, I believe it was Scream that did most of the heavy lifting for the team. I thought initially I would be giving it to Benji, but there were times where Aquarius had gotten the better of Benji, and Benji had to wait and didn't have an effective early game as like he wanted to, and had to wait till late game and really become a frontliner for the eUnited, and it was really Scream having the effect that eUnited wanted them to have against Luminosity. So I'm gonna give it to Scream, and for the wild card round, I don't think. I mean, to me, money's adapting. My money's on adapting. I mean, it's you can make the argument for Cherio, and Cherio played really well, but it was more of the composition than it was just Cherio. But adapting, returning to form, and really showing that he can adjust to this tank meta, this tank jungle meta, really did numbers for me. So we usually only do 2 MVPs, but this week I'm going to give it to 3. And
yeah,
EU finals, Deathwalker. NA finals, that goes to Scream. And the wildcard MVP goes to adapting.
Yeah, I agree with 2 of those, actually. For the EU side, I'm gonna give mine to Kalas instead, because Kalas, he was like the definition of a support this entire tournament, right? He played great against Dick, set up a lot of stuff, and then obviously against Obey, he had an amazing set.
Liam Millsy throwing his hands up in the air after Carlos plucks him with a Silas or Sylvanas pull.
Yeah, those pulls in the last game, man, they were amazing. He pulled. Okay, if you haven't seen this, our viewers, he pulled Ataraxia, who was playing Izanami, after he had gone over a wall with his stealth leap, like underground dash thingy. Pulled him right back out of stealth. He pulled like Emilsi through a wall as well, just trying to escape to the solo side tower. Pulled him back in.
I'll give you credit there. It just killed me.
Yeah, it wasn't even like at one time he didn't even throw his hands up like in frustration. He just
threw it up.
Thumbs up.
Threw it up like.
Just gave him a thumbs up, you know, because he was himself thoroughly impressed with that pull by Carlos. So those pulls.
Support giving a support some love. That was.
Yeah. I mean, who else is going to give support some love? Except for me, of course, because I'm giving him some love right now. point is, Carlos was amazing this weekend. He deserves an MVP. Even though Def Walker was also amazing. But Carlos felt he was a bit more consistent as well. Because Def Walker had some pretty bad matches. You know.
Def Walker had some really great matches too. So.
Yeah, but Carlos had only great matches. And that one Nox match, which doesn't count because Nox is not a good support. Unless Stardust is playing her. So on the NA side, I absolutely agree with Scream. Right, it was a contention between him and Benji, but Benji didn't have the greatest of sets. Like in the games that they lost, in the one game that they lost against Luminosity, he didn't look very good, whereas Scream still seemed like he had some impact, or at least didn't give up as many deaths as Benji did. Wait, they lost 2 games against Luminosity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Point being, overall, looking at the entire set, I thought that Scream had more of an impact there. And his Odin pick as well, right? Basically won them the last game, the final game of that set as well. And he had an amazing game there as well. And yeah, very impressed by Scream's performances there, honestly. And on the as far as the wildcards bracket is concerned, you already said that for you it was between Cherio and Adapting. For me, it is similar, or it is the same. And Cherio over the entire weekend, right? I think he faced tougher opposition because they faced Obey as well. And looking at just the wildcard brackets, Adapting looked good, and he looked. And I think there's something to be said about rewarding him for finally settling into a different role. And if this trend continues to happen, right, he might very well end up being the world's MVP as well, even though he's probably not going to get it, because now he's setting up more instead of just hard carrying his ass off.
Adapted to the meta. Finally.
Yeah. Adapting, finally becoming his namesake.
Adapted.
So yeah. Those are our MVPs, yeah. And I'm glad we agree on at least 2 of them. And Carlos is really just getting some support love. Let's be honest about this. And with that said, unless you have anything else to say, any shoutouts you want to give?
No, but I do want to say, I'm going to surprise you a little bit. And I'm going to say something about next week's episode. I want to do a little game, and I'm going to give you a week to prepare. I want you to take all 6 SPL teams.
Okay.
Think of a skin for their world championship.
So all 6 teams that are at the world championship.
Yes. So think of, if Elevate wins championship, which god is going to get their skin? If Luminosity wins world championship, think of, and we'll discuss all 6 teams next week, and we'll have a skin. We'll figure out what skin.
Okay, sounds good.
Each should have.
Can I still try and get a guest on for that?
Yeah.
Okay, I will try, honestly.
More the merrier.
Yeah, let's
try. They can
it.
weigh in too.
What?
But they can weigh in on the skin idea too.
Yeah, of course. They have to if they want to come. That's a condition. Well, anyway. With that being said, you should look forward to next week, guys. Because that was it from this week. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a like on YouTube, on SoundCloud, on wherever you are. And if you want to be notified when new episodes come out, you can subscribe to us on YouTube. You can follow us on SoundCloud. We post all new episodes there whenever they come out. You can also follow us on Twitter, where you will be notified as well once new episodes come out. You just have to obviously actively follow it, because that's how Twitter works. And thank you all for listening and watching this week's episode. And thank you, Sabo, for being here with me again after this 2-week break. I hope we're coming back, and we're coming back stronger, I think. So yeah, good night. Good Smite.